Hi everyone, and welcome to the Say As It Is with Pete podcast series. I'm Pete, your host, and each week I will bring you some frank and honest conversations covering various topics from learning and development, apprenticeships, funding, HR, strengths, recruitment, ESG, well-being, ED&I, employability, and much, much more. So let's get this week's episode underway and say as it is. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Say As It Is with Pete. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about work experience. Yes, DWP work experience. Why, you say? Well, actually, as I've been looking at in this series about what's going on with the changes with SWAP, funding, DWP, apprenticeships, etc., I've been running some boot camps or SWAPs, which is sector work-based skills academies for the company I work for. And it's been attached to an apprenticeship straight after. There's been some pros and cons, and there's been some ups and downs and some learning curves around it, which is perfect. And that's the point of doing the pilot that I did. But I want to talk about work experience just in general, because in general, work experience isn't really something that is available much within companies anymore. It used to be. Especially in secondary school, you'd have to get like a week or 2 week work placement with a company, go work with them, see what the job is like, fill out a diary for the week, get the employer to sign it off to say that you've done your work experience, and give feedback. And that gave you the wider view of what the working world was, because you had to go to work, you had to do things. And I remember doing my work experience, and that was 2 weeks at the old Crane Bank for British Airways in their graphics department. And I created some fantastic DC-10, let's go back a long time, some DC-10 training flip charts, which I designed with Hazel, who was head of graphics for British Airways then, and I got to design them and print them and have a wonderful time, and it was great. It gave me some real good experience, and it was in aviation, which I loved. So work experience is dying down, and I obviously come from an L&D background. I'm an L&D practitioner or professional or business partner, whatever you want to call me. So I'm up for work experience, but I think sometimes there's a bit of demand. Some employers are not sure about work experience and what makes good work experience, because sometimes work experience can be just them making tea or coffee or photocopying or faxing, and you don't want them on there. You don't want them getting on the system and doing things and various other things. But actually, they need to experience it like somebody else. So there's a couple of ways we can look at work experience, but I'm going to break this down into a couple of things. I'm going to do this podcast on DWP work experience, and then I'm going to do a part 2, which is how employers can have good work experience in different setups. So in this one, as I say, we're going to focus on the DWP work experience and how that looks, what that is, how it affects employers, how it affects potential employees and candidates, and what that kind of framework looks like. And then I'll do the next episode, which is part 2, on good or potentially good work experience that employers can create to help young people and existing people kind of gain experience and into work. Because we all bitch and moan that people don't have the experience, but how can you give someone, or how do you expect someone to do the job if they don't have the experience, but you want them to have the experience? What's the point of having an L&D team to train these people, or create the training to help train these people to give them the knowledge, skills and behaviours in the role if you're saying you want experience when you're not going to get it? Anyway, that's a separate discussion on its own. So DWP, Department of Work and Pensions work experience. So what is this? Well, the DWP are always on the lookout for new initiatives. So I won't call them new initiatives. I would say these are tried and tested, done and dusted, and it's the government are looking for something new to look at and something to re-pick up, dust it off, brush it down, give it a revamp, put it in some new clothing, and then push it out the door. It's like that saying, a pig in lipstick. Yeah, it really is. It's really like a pig in lipstick. It's been done. A lot of this stuff has been done before, but they want to rebrand it, rename it, get it out there, show people that it's completely different when actually it's not. So there's a couple of different forms of DWP work experience, and Patrick McFadden, who heads up DWP, has recently announced a week worth of paid experience for employers to give people at national minimum wage, and at least give them at least 5 days work experience. Well, is 5 days long enough? No, it's not. There's no way 5 days is long enough for someone to gain basic work experience. It's not, and it's depending on the job. And he said this would be great for hospitality because they do 5 days work experience, and at the 5 days you give an interview or guarantee an interview and take them on if you want. If not, they gain the experience. This sounds like some current schemes that are already out there. Now, you got to remember, I don't only do L&D, I do social value. So I've got my ear to the ground on the social value, and I've done recruitment. So I have a very broad spectrum of my career, and I always link recruitment, L&D all together, and career development and pathways, because it all interlinks together, believe it or not. So yeah, and it we'll do a podcast on that, but it all interlinks, right? So that pre-employment to employment to career progression and development is all in that L&D spectrum. And they always say, oh, but it's recruitment, you need to recruit. Yeah, but you've got to think of initiatives to bring people in, right? So Pat McFadden has come up with this paid week work experience that employers should be doing, and encourages employers to do it. So there are some pros and cons to that, because it's great for someone to learn some new skills, getting them into work, but it's a lot of time and effort from the employer's perspective. And it's a cost to the employer, because it's the cost and time of not only the individuals that need to run it and do it, but it's all the prep and setup. It's them paying the individual and everything else. So it's an absolute minefield. And looking at this, I did a exercise with this for DWP, because DWP did approach me about work experience, and I went back saying to them, look, this is going to cost us, across 4 of our locations. If we do this in 4 of our locations and have 6 people a week, and we run it twice a month for 6 months, we are going to invest just on ourselves. That's the cost to the company. So that's the overheads that pay for the training and the staff that are doing the training, the employer contribution costs on top of the national minimum wage, or the wage that we're paying for our own current team members and the new trainee or work experience candidates, plus all of what we need to do as a business to get this going. It's going to cost about £22,000 in a month to run that. So we're already investing 22 grand a month to run this across 4 properties, to offer a guaranteed interview, which probably that person won't even last more than a few days, or if they stay the week, they may not want the job at the end of it, or they will join then disappear after the next week. So it's got to be done the right way, and that's 22 grand across 4 properties. It's a lot, right? So by the time you have that for 6 months, it's about roughly, if we round it all up, about £150,000 in 6 months that we're investing as a business. And I'm expecting a lot of ROI on that, and that's return on investment. And there's lots of things that I'm going to be looking for if I'm doing a week's worth of experience, what I want from it for an ROI if I'm investing all this money in it. So it's a lot of money. So you can understand as an employer, I've looked at that as an individual from an L&D perspective and a social value front, and gone, a week? No, because there's a lot of money investment for a week, and I'm not going to get anything from it. So no. So that model from Pat McFadden, no, doesn't work. Now, the next model is 6 weeks work experience. Yes, DWP wants to team up with employers to offer a 6-week work placement. Now, how this 6-week work placement works is that we would take on a number of people for 6 weeks to give them the knowledge, skills and experience that they need. And at the end of that 6 weeks, we then give them a guaranteed interview and either keep them or let them go. But if we let them go because they didn't meet the interview requirements and the performance over the 6 weeks, then we just say, you've not met it. Unfortunately, we're not going to offer you a job. But thank you very much for your time and effort. But if there's some really good ones, we should be able to interview, keep them and roll them through. Okay. That's 6 weeks. Now, the difference here. So in Pat McFadden's newer version of 1 week paid work experience at national minimum wage, as I say, there's a big cost into that already, right? Now, the 6 week one, this is where DWP try and sell it as a, well, you know what? It's 6 weeks unpaid for you as the employer. So you don't have to pay any money whatsoever. You have someone for 6 weeks for free to trial them and then to give them a guaranteed interview and take them or not after 6 weeks. Sorry? You're telling me that you're going to give me someone for 6 weeks and I don't have to pay for 6 weeks? Now, don't get me wrong. Most employers are going to jump at this and go, 6 weeks? I don't have to pay any money for 6 weeks? Let's do it. Let's take 50. If I only have to give guaranteed interviews, let's take 50. No. It's got to be done the right way. And ethically, I can't see an employer wanting to take someone for 6 weeks, unpaid work experience, to then just give them a guaranteed interview and decide whether to take them or not, because employers will take advantage. There'll be employers that will take advantage and they will use and abuse the candidates for their own benefit to get free labour, and they just have a continuous turnover every 6 weeks. No, not going to work. And I disagree with that completely, and I don't want to touch it with a bargee pole. Yes, I don't want to touch it with a bargee pole, and I don't want to touch it with a bargee pole because I don't believe it's ethically right. Now, DWP say that they will cover the costs of the uniform and the travel and the wraparound support for the candidate, which they will do. Don't get me wrong, they'll pay for 6 weeks travel. You know, they'll pay for them to get to and from work. They'll do everything. But then they're expected to buy their own lunch. They're expected to, get there when needed or cover any additional costs themselves. And DWP will buy them a uniform, because there is a uniform allowance for them to get, and they get the uniform H&M. It'd be nice if they actually saved some money and brought them from Primark. That's my opinion. But they get H&M clothing, because H&M have a deal with DWP. Did you know that? Probably not. Well, they do. So look, this person is going to come to your workplace. You don't get to interview them. You take them for 6 weeks to then interview and see if they're worth it. But as an employer, for a workplace candidate, that's great. 6 weeks work experience, but there's no guarantee they get a job at the end of it, and they're not being paid. They just need to make sure they turn up every day for the 6 weeks, because if they don't, there's consequences. Now let's break this down over the 6 weeks. So what does it mean for the employer? Well, for the employer, there is a cost of overheads, and that's the cost to train somebody, to onboard them, train them, and spend that 6 weeks investing in that individual. And that's a lot of time and effort. So if you say, I don't know, average onboarding somebody through the system and everything else, because you've got to make sure they've got the correct right to work, because you don't want to be taking on somebody that doesn't have the correct right to work, although DWP say, oh, they do. We as employees still need to do that check. So you do your due diligence as an employer. You sign a new agreement that it's a 6 week work placement with a guaranteed interview. So you've got to come up with some paperwork relating to that to cover your side legally on a HR perspective. So there's that process to sort out. There's the process to make sure that they are managed over that 6 weeks correctly and productively and efficiently, and that there's regular weekly check-ins. You need to figure out how the reporting system is going to work if there's issues with that employee back to DWP or their work coach. You then got to consider the overheads for the people training them and the time that's taken to do that and the cost of everything else that comes with that. So it could be that you're potentially investing 3,000 to 4,000 in that time, but a little bit more than that, because you're having to pay for somebody to check in with them on a weekly basis, train them for the first 2 weeks or so. So there's all this investment. So there's still a cost to the employer, and the employer needs to outweigh that cost and go, well, actually, having someone for 6 weeks unpaid sounds great and amazing because I'm not paying for somebody, but all the additional costs to me as an employer, time out the business needed for people to do this, everything else, what's the actual cost and what am I getting from it? Yeah, because there's no guarantee that that person is going to stay the 6 weeks. They may stay the first week and then disappear. It's all prospective on the individual, because we can't, unfortunately, maintain the individual's work ethics, because they're not like they used to be, unfortunately, I have to say that. But it's a lot of time for the employer. So the employer has to weigh up the cost involved from their side. So, onboarding, who's training them, how long the training is for, over that 6 weeks, because really they need to be managed and performed over that 6 weeks. Then they've got to be interviewed, and then you need to decide whether you take them or not. If you take them, then there's the process of then onboarding them officially through a contract of employment, making sure that they are onto your payroll, that they're going to get paid, and then there's more cost to you as an employer, because you're not only then paying the wage, but you're paying the employer contributions, which is normally on average about £3.20 extra on top of a normal hourly rate. But then you've got to think about, as an employer, those extra things, because the government will say, yeah, but as an employer, if they're under 24, you don't pay your class 1 NI. Great, but there's people that are going to be coming to you that are not 24 or below. They're older. So it doesn't always work out. So there's a lot of things that the employer has to consider. And from the employer's side, I'm not saying employers you shouldn't do it. You should. But do it in a way that you feel you're going to get there correctly. And in the second episode that will follow this one, I'll tell you how you can do it. But you've got to see what there is. But from a perspective of an employer, there's lots of costs involved that we have to weigh up before we even think about this. So DWP, stop pushing. Now, for the candidate, this is the interesting part. So the candidate goes, okay, I'll do 6 weeks work experience. So DWP will pay for uniform and get the uniform ordered from H&M. Will pay, so that's for shirts, trousers, shoes, whatever they need to get for work uniform, they'll get it. They'll pay their travel for the next 6 weeks. Now that's either done 2 ways. That's either they will pay it up front, or the candidate has to get it and then claim for it weekly. So there's a pro and con to the travel side. And there's no food allowance or anything from them anyway, so the candidate then has to buy their own lunch, which they're probably struggling with money anyway, and this is unpaid. So they know they're getting the travel and the uniform sorted, but they're not getting paid for this work experience. So why should they do it? Because they're not getting paid, right? So also with that, there is another condition which doesn't help. And that condition is, if that candidate takes up that work experience placement and they stay a week and they disappear, or they play up, or they go AWOL, and they do, and they can do. And I'm not saying, look, every candidate is different. I know that every candidate is different. But from past experience, so they stay, they disappear, they go, they cause problems, there's all sorts. I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but there are some. And then what happens is, that person then plays up, disappears, and never comes back in that 6 weeks. You, as the employer, report it to their work coach. Then that individual will then be sanctioned for 2 weeks for not completing the 6 weeks employment trial. Which then leads to the question of, if someone is going to go and do this, they've got to be doing it for their own benefit, not for DWP. Because theoretically, DWP is saying, well, if you don't stick to your 6 weeks work trial or your job experience, and you leave within that 6 weeks for whatever reason, you're getting sanctioned, which basically means they won't get paid for 2 weeks. They will get no money for 2 weeks. It'll be deducted from them. How bad is that? So they're being theoretically forced into work. Now, DWP say, we're not forcing people. Yeah, you are. You're basically saying to people, if you don't commit to what we're going to do for you, and you pick it up and you don't commit to it and you disappear, then we'll sanction you. And that's a lesson for you to learn, because every time you do it, we're going to sanction you. Yes, there's I'm mixed 50-50 on it. Yes, I agree, and no, I don't agree. Yes, I agree they should be sanctioned if they're going to muck around, because they're getting an opportunity to get back into work. But then again, DWP are technically forcing somebody to go, because they know if they don't go, they're going to get sanctioned. So they drag their sorry little asses through for the week or 6 weeks, and then they will be like, oh, it didn't work. Well, But then there's a caveat to this, because if you stick the 6 weeks, so if that candidate sits there for the 6 weeks and does work experience, then goes for an interview, then gets the job, but then decides not to take the job. Will they be penalised for 2 weeks? Will they be sanctioned for those 2 weeks for not taking the job that they were given? Yes, they will be. They will be sanctioned. So again, they're forced into work, into taking the opportunity, and then once they're in the opportunity, they need, and they don't want to obviously work, they then need to figure out how to get themselves out of work, and that could be going sick, that could be not turning up, that could be causing too many problems for the employer to then run them through the disciplinary to then terminate them. It's all sorts. Then they go back onto the benefit system. Okay, so yeah, work experience at DWP is a nightmare, to say the least, and I'm not gonna lie, it's confusing sometimes. So for employers, and you've got to look at the time, effort and money contribution that you're going to invest in this for either a week or 6 weeks, and then you are looking at that return on investment as an employer to figure out what is the return on investment from actually doing this, and is it worth it, yes or no. And most employers will say it's too much effort, too much money contribution to it, we can't afford to do that, so no. Then for the candidate, you've got to think about, do I do this, yes or no? If I don't do it, then I could, still be in trouble and be sanctioned. If I do it and I don't like it and I quit during the 6 weeks, I'm going to be sanctioned. If I take a job at the end of it because I have to, and if I don't take that job offer, I'm going to get sanctioned. So I better take it. And it's nuts. It really is nuts. And you also got the swap. So the sector work-based academies are between a week to 4 weeks, then with either a 4 to 6 week work experience on top of that. Again, that's part of this 6 week unpaid work experience that gives them a guaranteed interview at the end. So you're not only having a boot camp for, say, 4 weeks classroom-based learning to then go on a 6 week work placement unpaid. So you've been unpaid for that 4 weeks training, unpaid for 6 weeks. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks, 10 to 12 weeks of unpaid work. Having to pay your travel and then claim it back from DWP, or DWP issuing your travel. Nuts, right? Then out of that, you may not even get a job at the end of it. So you spent 12 weeks, 3 months doing this, and you haven't got a job, but you've ticked all the boxes to DWP. Okay, if you don't get a job at the end of that work experience, they can't penalise you because you weren't successful. You did it and you weren't successful. Fair dues. But if you've done everything and you've gone, and if you don't do everything, you don't do that full 6 weeks, you get penalised. If you don't take up the job offer at the end, you get penalised. So basically, it doesn't matter. You're going to be penalised anyway, because they're forcing you into work, theoretically, right? So it begs the belief that I can understand why people don't want to get off benefits, because they might as well stay on them because they're just being forced to go to work. So there's not really an incentive for them, is there? And employers, there's not much of an incentive either, because you've got time, effort and money to invest to do this. And some employers will take it as cheap labour. Some will take it as a social value recruitment side, which is great. But there's lots of pros and cons to the DWP work experience. And I think what I want to get from this podcast is for the employer to understand that there is a lot of time, effort and money to be invested. And you need to really think, is this for you? And is it worth doing? But it's got to be meaningful work experience. It's got to be genuine and meaningful to get a ROI for you as a business. And for the candidate, you've got to think, do you want to do the work experience? Because if you do, no matter what you do within that, say, 6 to 12 weeks, you could be penalised for either not attending all of the training or dropping out, or if you drop out, you're going to get penalised. If you don't take the job offer at the end of the 6 weeks, you're going to get penalised for 2 weeks. So theoretically, as a candidate, you're being kind of forced to work by DWP, but you're being forced to stay and to run the course of the 12 weeks to then decide whether you to then find out whether you get the job or not. If you don't get the job, it's fair dues. You've had a go. But do you want to do that again? Do you want to do another 6 weeks work experience? No, you probably wouldn't, because you don't want to do it. So you have to actively still look for jobs, or if you take the job and then you cause problems, to get fired so you don't get penalised for leaving. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I think this is the biggest thing employers have got to understand with this work experience, is if you do the work experience, you take someone through, but actually they don't want to go through, but they're just going with the waves and they're going with the ride. They take the job and then they are a HR nightmare. You're then going to have to get rid of them, right? Go through the disciplinary, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking to be sacked, because if they leave, they get sanctioned. But if they get sacked, they won't get sanctioned because they were sacked or terminated for poor performance or behaviour, whatever it may be. So then it's easy for them not to get sanctioned. So there's lots of things you've got to think about when it comes to work experience with DWP. And don't let them pour the wool over your eyes for employers or candidates, because you've got to figure, is it right for you? That's the biggest thing. So look, I'm going to wind it up there, because that's what I could really say on the work experience of DWP. You have a week that Pat McFadden has introduced, which has to be paid at minimum wage, and then give a guaranteed interview at the end, and either take them or don't take them. And then the other options are 6 weeks unpaid work experience candidate in your work placement, but the employer has to invest everything to make sure that the support and development is there for them, and offer them a guaranteed interview at the end. Or you do a swap, which could be 4 weeks plus 6 weeks work experience, which then leads to a 12-week placement, theoretically, where there's still time, effort and money involved and bits and pieces. But what I will say is that I work with the social value framework with People Plus, and they send us candidates that have done swaps and other things, and they just come directly for interviews, and we interview and either take them or don't take them based on the interviews. And that's what we do, because they're doing lots of other things in that world, that they're gaining the knowledge, skills and behaviours for pre-employment, and then we take them from that pre-employment stage. But I will discuss that on the next podcast. So guys, I hope you found this interesting about the 3 different types of work experience at DWP and the benefits for employers and potential employees, what kind of goes into it, so costs, overheads, all those kind of things, how it can make the employer feel, but also how it can make the candidate feel. And I have to say this, I really have to say this now. So with DWP, you're not a customer, you're not a claimant. They've reworded that, and I don't like this word. So to DWP, if you're claiming from DWP, and you're claiming in job seekers and universal credit, everything like that, the Department of Work and Pensions call you a customer, not a client, not a candidate, a customer. So you are a customer to DWP. That's all you are, a customer. Sad, really. Gone are the days when you're known as a job seeker, or you are someone who's unemployed. You're not unemployed. Yes, you are unemployed, but to DWP, you're a customer to them, and they are serving their customers to help their customers get back into work. Don't like it. Don't like that word, customer. Don't know why. Doesn't sit right. But yeah, if you are looking for work with DWP, and you're trying to get yourself back into the working world, I applaud you. It's hard. Keep going. But DWP likes to call you a customer. I don't like that word. But anyway, look, that's another episode, I think. So listen, I'm going to wind it up here, because we've covered the 3 types of work experience from DWP and what they actually are. But on the next episode, I will discuss options or ways that work experience can be meaningful. But also, I will do a part 3 for candidates to get the best out of their work experience. So the next episode will be all about, the best way for employers and employees to get something from work experience and make work experience meaningful. And then the third part of this will then be to look at how a candidate can get more out of work experience than they would think. So until the next episode, enjoy, share, like, and I shall catch you on the next episode.